Hello there. This is Johnny Silvercloud, and this is the soul brother and one of a kind doing the podcast hashtag AfroSapiophile. And today we are here to talk about surprise, surprise, the election season that just transpired, so to speak. So, for those who have been living on a planet that's not named after Roman or Greek gods, um, a rock on a strange present planet. Donald Trump has won the United States presidency. So now we're looking at Donald J. Trump, presidential candidate elect, and Hillary Clinton lost. The Democrats lost, and the Republicans won. And one of the things I've noticed is it's a lot. There's a lot of things being noticed, but a lot of people are taking things hard. A lot of people are also trying to lay blame on people here and there, left and right. I've heard of folks saying, well, it's the black folks because they didn't go out and vote for Clinton, or which doesn't make that much sense. Folks saying, well, it was the protest votes who voted for Jill Stein or Gary Johnson, or folks wrote their own names in. They're the ones to blame. And I think that's also equally as flawed. So I think that the blame lies on Clinton and the Democrats as an institution versus actually blaming others. Well, you can blame those who vote for Trump too, but what I want to do here is more so evaluate how and why the Democrats lost. Why did Clinton lose? So what's your take on all of this, Steve?
So it's, you got to set the framework to understand why the Democrats screwed up so bad in this election, right? There is, on both sides of the aisle, on your Republicans and your Democrats, there's this huge populist movement in the country that is anti-establishment, anti-government, anti-corporate, just everything that is the way it is, people are trying to bucket and they're not happy with the system. That's what people are walking into. And between our two candidates, you had one who is just the pinnacle of everything that represents. 30 years in government, bought out by big donors, been a politician, speaks like a politician, and you got a person that is a racist and a sexist, but he is not part of that system. And if they had just put somebody else up against Donald Trump that was also not as ingrained in that system, they would have won. There were polls out just before the election, and I just saw another one today that showed that if Bernie Sanders had been the nominee, someone else was also trying to buck the trend, he would have crushed Donald Trump. The unfortunate thing is the only outsider, the only non-establishment candidate that was an option was Donald Trump.
Damn.
And so the Democrats knew that, but it was, in their mind, it was Hillary's turn, and they had to make sure she was the candidate. And that's the way it played out as a result.
Yeah. I'd like to talk a bit about what you said there about Bernie Sanders and anti-establishment. I do believe that is a factor. One of the factors of Hillary Clinton losing is that she's more so an establishment type. As a matter of fact, you heard me say this more than once. I accused Hillary Clinton largely of trying to be a diet Republican or Republican light, so to speak, because it seemed like she didn't really want to truly be a liberal, or at least engage in liberal or progressive values while campaigning. She seemed like an empty hat, empty suit, and it looked like she wanted to be an option for Republican voters who did not want to be racist or sexist. She did not foresee, if that was her strategy, which looks like it was, she didn't foresee the notion of Republican voters who are decent or semi-decent, whatnot. She didn't see the foresight of maybe they would just blow off the racism, sexism, or not see it, period. Pretend it's not there, and then vote for Trump, So That anti-establishment thing, I think that is a serious reason why she lost. And on top
Yeah.
of that, looking at Bernie Sanders, I'll have to agree I have to agree at the notion that he would have won, because you have Donald Trump being anti-establishment. That's like a really huge plus for him. Bernie Sanders has the same thing. So at that point, these two identities equal out. They're on equal platform. So from there, Bernie Sanders would force Donald Trump to talk about policy, which is his weak point. He don't know what the fuck he's doing. So I do believe that Bernie Sanders would have won, because Bernie Sanders, unlike Donald Trump, he has substance. So yeah.
Yeah, he had a plan for how he would uncorrupt the government. Donald Trump has no plans whatsoever. In fact, I doubt he has any intentions of doing anything like that. So he probably intends to maintain a lot of the system that is. So yeah, Bernie Sanders would have come. Plus, he wouldn't have been saying, Bernie Sanders doesn't say derogatory things against large groups of people. So that's another plus for him. But I will say that it wasn't just Hillary Clinton that took this kind of Republican light approach to things. That is the core of the Democratic Party now. The core of the DNC and the Democratic Party is Republican light. That is who they're aiming to be. They don't want to be progressive. So Hillary Clinton wasn't doing her own thing when she tried to push that agenda. That is the Democratic Party now. That is their policy position. So they could not understand why all these other voters that were more to the left of the Democratic Party weren't happy. They're like, we're right where we're supposed to be. We are Republican light, and the Republicans are extra extreme. So why isn't everyone happy? Well, they're not happy because you've disenfranchised everybody to the left of you.
Yeah, literally and figuratively. Well, maybe not literally. They have to actually be sitting to the left of them, but yeah, you get the idea. Yeah, shit, man. I'll have to agree. You're right. That has been the Democratic Party ever since past the civil rights movement. Ever since past Jimmy Carter, they've been trying to be Republican light ever since probably the first Clinton. What Clinton did, one of the things that Clinton did to seal the notion that Democrats can be presidents too in this modern day and age, was visit this prison execution with this guy who was kind of retarded or something like that, and watch him die. And that was like a really cold-blooded thing to do. The guy that got executed that day that he watched, the guy actually ate his last meal, then saved part of it, like saying, "Well, I'll save that for later." So this guy didn't even have the capacity to understand that he was being sent to his doom. Yet Bill Clinton felt the need to ensure that people figure that he's tough on crime. And then on top of that, the crime policies that he had in the 90s that largely targeted blacks and other ethnic minorities in the United States. So from there, ever since Clinton's success there, that has been the Democrats' way of operating, and it's deeply unfortunate because Democrats are usually called liberals left and right and stuff like that, but they're really not that liberal at all. At least the establishment is not. Is the Democratic Party a possible spot for liberalisms and progressives and stuff like that? Yeah, but do the establishment prefer that or agree with it? No, they don't. They wish to be Republican-like, and I'll have to say, yeah. Clinton is she's like a solid face of that, and it's not exactly her fault. Well, it's not her alone. So I'll reel that part right there. With that being said, disenfranchising the progressives and stuff. Let's talk about this negative identity thing. You remember when I brought that up on how Hillary Clinton and Democrats as a whole, and generally speaking, they wish to be. They try to characterize themselves as, well, I'm not those guys over there, and those guys over there are the Republicans who have no problem playing in mud, being repugnant, and being cantankerous and shitty towards minorities and stuff like that. Racist, bigots, xenophobes, sexist, xenophobia, all forms of xenophobias and shit. So what's your take on that? The negative identity thing.
Well, yeah, Hillary Clinton really tried to play on that in this case, and I wouldn't fault her for that. It was a bad move overall for a number of reasons, but to say like, hey, at least I'm not this orange puppet over here, vote for me. That seems like on the surface a way to go about doing it. The thing is you're still saying, I'm not this racist guy over here. I'm something different that you also hate. Maybe hate it in a different way, but at least I'm not that kind of thing that you hate. I'm a different thing that you hate. And she played up on that too. If you look at the ways that she tried to go about winning the primaries, whether or not you accept that as being legitimate or illegitimate of a win, there's a lot of questionable things there. Every time Bernie Sanders would try to rile up the public and get the progressives motivated, he got out tens of millions of people that were progressive to vote. The response from the Clinton campaign was, whoa, calm down. We can't really do that. I don't know why you're getting so excited. Just chill out. I'm the more average candidate. You should go for me because this whole excitement thing just isn't going to work. That was her campaign's tactic during the primaries. Like, stop. Yeah. Her campaign slogan was "Stop being so excited." Right? And so that carried into the general election where she's like, yeah, I'm going to give you an average, normal presidency like you've always had, which you hate. But at least it's not racism and sexism, which you also hate. So you're left with these people having to choose between which thing they hate more or less.
Yeah. Each time I talk about the negative identity thing, I try to use an example that is where people, which it'll really click, and man, which will really click. Like, and my favorite example, or not favorite, but get the idea. My example is rape. So, if a woman just got raped, and you have a guy who actually is a rapist, and you have the guy who is the not rapist, but he watched this person get raped, and he's pretty much fine with it. Like, he lets it happen and everything else. Watched it occur, did nothing. And his whole thing is, well, I'm the not rapist guy. Will that really fly? Well, probably not. I mean, I sincerely hope it wouldn't. So that's what it's like when it comes to Clinton. We have all this racism, we have all these forms of xenophobias attacking Mexicans and stuff like that. You have black folks and other minorities being shot left and right by cops. These cops don't see any prison time. They go out into these communities in which they inflict more terror. Like, holy crap, I get stopped by a car. I don't know if I get shot or not. That's nuts. No group of people in any first world nation should have to deal with that fear. But this actually does exist. And you have groups like, say, Black Lives Matter, which attempted to talk to her, and they fell on solid concrete ears because she just couldn't figure out, like, hey, maybe possibly to procure these votes, I can answer their problems. Yeah. When politicians assume they have someone's vote because they're not vitriolic towards that one group, it gets problematic because people will get tired of it eventually. We will get tired of it.
Yeah, I would take your analogy one step further in this case as to what Hillary Clinton is. She's not the not rape person in this case. She is someone that has been going door to door robbing people's houses, but then when she's caught says, at least I didn't rape anybody like that guy. I've just been stealing out of people's houses. Right? That's what I would say is the negative identity, because it's not like she was neutral and just didn't take action. She does take action, takes a very negative action towards the populace.
Oh, yeah. Damn. Yeah, I'll have to agree with that one. Definitely. Tim, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of trying to figure out why my toolbox isn't coming on now.
Yeah, my toolbox not coming up either. Is your video coming up though? I mean,
I can see you. I don't know if you can see me, but I can see
Can't
you.
see you.
Okay.
It's all
how's that?
good. Yeah, we can see you now. I mean, I'm like, well, it's a podcast, so the videos are secondary. But yeah,
Yeah.
we
It's
should
nice to
take
be able
some
to see
farm.
each other, though.
Yeah, we're talking about.
It's been a little while since we did this.
Yeah, talking about Hillary Clinton, the loss that the Dems took, and why and how, and maybe perhaps how it can be avoided again if they're willing to learn.
Well, man, I think probably a lot of the problem is, to be honest, Hillary Clinton. I mean, I said at the start of this, and don't get me wrong, I kind of came around on part of this, for reasons I can explain, as I go on. But part of the problem is Hillary Clinton. I think she represents, I said it at the beginning of the whole process, there's an awful lot of water under the bridge between me and Hillary. There's a lot that's gone on, and without subscribing to a lot of the things that conservative commentators have constantly harped on against Hillary for the last 30 years, her way, her methodology, the way she, let's go back all the way to 1992 and her healthcare plan. Her answer was to expand the bureaucracy to create this enormous, did you remember the great visual of this enormous flow chart that, where she tried to explain there's and I'll have to find it and see if I can post it later in the group. There's this amazing photo from television in 1992 where Hillary is standing with a pointer trying to explain this enormous and crazily complicated flowchart of how this proposed healthcare system was supposed to work. And nobody in the room, there are some really smart people in the room, nobody in the room got it. And ultimately that's why, and she's very bitter that it failed because nobody took the time to understand it. But some people, sometimes things are too complicated for people to understand. And that's been a kind of a theme with Hillary Clinton is that, maybe she's really good at what she does, but sometimes she doesn't register with people. And, I think maybe she doesn't connect with people. They don't get excited about her. They don't relate to her. And while that's a horrible criteria by which to choose a president, it's the truth. And it's how people do, and that's just, and that's not all, but I don't want to, dominate the microphone here for a minute. I want to throw it back to you guys and see what you think about that.
Yeah. What's your take on that, Steve?
I think it's true. Relatability is a key factor here. But again, I think goes back to what I was saying a little bit ago was that she is overly pragmatic in the way she presents herself and her ideas, which is why I said that like everything with during the primaries with Bernie Sanders, as he was trying to be inspirational and getting people riled up, her campaign response was always, whoa, let's calm it down here. That's not realistic. Let's be more pragmatic and realistic. And that attitude is not how you garner votes. Right. And so that relatability aspect.
It's not how you defeat Trump or combat or defeat Trump either, because as she went against Jeb Bush, I can totally picture that working, but she wasn't.
No. And, that's a good point, too, because Trump especially was gaining his votes based on a lot of raw emotion from people. And she couldn't steal that emotion away from them. In a lot of ways. And again, it's part of that's because she's very representative of a very ingrained establishment government versus someone on the outside. But if she was more relatable, more charismatic, she might have been able to get some of that emotion directed toward her. But she couldn't really do that.
Yeah. A while back ago, I was, like equal opportunity office guy. And I was talking to the guy who's above me, my boss in it. And of course, I'm smarter as far as the psychology part of it, but he's better at the bureaucracy part of it. And I was explaining to him how, we can use logic and reason to correct racism and sexism, things like that. And I point out how those who are racist and sexist usually make emotional appeals. He pointed out the fact that the thing about emotion, you can't just throw away emotion totally because emotion make people do things. So emotion drives action. Logic just drives the why. So should be the why behind the action. But logic in itself is not going to drive folks to the polls. In her case.
Well,
So,
I think probably Stephen could speak better to this than me. But if you look on I remember from way back in my schooling a pyramid type diagram of how people respond to different appeals, and I'm pretty sure that an emotional appeal is lower toward the base level of response than a logical appeal. You have to get past the emotion for a logical appeal to register with people. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but if people are being driven by emotion, you're never getting to the logical center of how they make decisions. Is that correct? I think that there was a lot of that, particularly in the last week or two of the campaign. I think one of the things that I'm, most certain about is that, I took a look at a stat the other day that said that Hillary Clinton drew almost 10 million less voters than elected Barack Obama in 2012. And those are Democratic voters. Those weren't Republican crossover voters, because we all know Barack Obama didn't have a lot of crossover voters. What I do think is that in the last week of the campaign, a combination of things that attacked Hillary Clinton's credibility and her integrity caused, first of all, the reference by Director Comey about the emails, bringing it up at the very last minute, just when it looked like that had been overcome, appealed to anybody who, was kind of holding their nose and voting for Hillary because they didn't like Donald Trump. And then the really heavy shot was the WikiLeaks drop. And you'd be surprised which one it was. I think it was the WikiLeaks drop where they dropped the email about the Democratic primaries having been kind of taken away from Bernie Sanders. And I think a lot of Bernie Sanders voters, a lot of the voters who stayed home didn't turn out, were Bernie Sanders voters who were going to hold their nose and vote for Hillary, a lot of them. But then when they realized their candidate had, maybe had that election stolen from, they said, we're not gonna support her anyway, even though we really don't like Trump. But man, I think that last minute appeal to their emotional response of, hey, we had this stolen from us after all, was a huge effect.
Hey, Steve, you think the emails thing that FBI director did some damage to her? Yeah,
I did. So Tim is correct. You got to that emotional appeal thing. In order to get to the logical reasoning, you have to. What happens is that people take the position that they're at, which is not well thought. A person's position is just where they stand. It doesn't deal with the motivations for it or the whys. That position where they stand at becomes ideological in the sense that it becomes part of their identity. So when you question that position, it's the same thing as telling a person, standing in front and telling a person, saying, you're a bad father, or you're fat and ugly. That same type of aggressive emotional response you get to that gets attached to these positional ideas too, because you extend your identity around that idea, or in some cases, that person. And that happened in both Trump's case with his voters who no longer needed a reason because their identity was attached to Trump. And it also happened with Bernie Sanders voters. I can attest to this to some extent. Happened to Bernie Sanders voters especially when they found out he was disenfranchised. Well, you haven't just attacked Bernie Sanders, you've attacked the personal identity of all those people that were supporting him too. And so getting past that to the more logical argument to say hey, really lesser of two evils here. It couldn't get past that for a lot of people that I know.
One point I want to bring up. I read an article somewhere. It was pretty solid. One point that I like to bring up is the fact that in many cases, when you don't have an incumbent to worry about, people tend to ever since televised media presidential campaigns, people tend to go for the total opposite to the 8-year incumbent. The 8-year president who does not. No need for incumbency. So when the presidential seat is an open void, people tend to go to, ever since televised media, people tend to go to the most opposite candidate. So the person had to be not like Obama regardless. And this is another reason why I think Bernie Sanders will win, to include even Joe Biden, who also is like more of a establishment person than Bernie is by far. But even Joe Biden himself would have won against Trump because he is opposite of President Obama. Black, no, he's white. Young, no, he's old. You know, is he the cool-headed guy? No, he's the hot-headed, crazy uncle guy. So Joe Biden would have been a perfect selection if the DNC wanted to have an establishment candidate. But here's the thing, though, looking back into history, you look at who was before Kennedy, Eisenhower. So you have this old grandfatherly guy versus this, young new hotness. What else? We can keep on going on like all throughout, televised presidencies. Well, people tend to go towards the person that's nothing like the last guy.
Well, going back all the way that far, you have Kennedy replacing, Eisenhower, who was, Eisenhower was the wartime president. He reaction to the wartime thing. He was a war hero. People trusted him. Eisenhower was cut out to be a president. Really, once he won the war, World War II, he was born to be the president at that point. And then, Kennedy represented a generational change. And of course, then Kennedy was shot and was replaced with, Lyndon Johnson as vice president, who was, again, as far as you could be the opposite at that point, with all presidents being, white males.
Well, that's his vice. So that was like by his selection.
Sure. But then, you look at who succeeded Johnson is Richard Nixon, who was the person they didn't choose in 1960 when Kennedy was elected. And then,
it was opposite of LBJ.
Sure. He was, very much opposite of LBJ. And then, of course, we didn't get to pick, entirely the next president after that. Gerald Ford succeeded him based on, his resignation. So, when that came about, and then, Jimmy Carter was a one-term president, the only time in modern history since the advent of television that a party has has succeeded a two-term president with another president was the first George Bush after Ronald Reagan. And I think that was more of an extension of the power of the Reagan Revolution than anything. That was an anomaly. That's not.
Well, no.
Going to be normal for most.
Hold on, right quick. George Bush was was head of the CIA. He was a geek, a nerd, a very very reticent guy. Weak voice. Meanwhile, Reagan was an actor. He knew how to
very charismatic fellow.
Crowds, charismatic. Yeah. So there's still this opposite this.
So even though they're the same party, I follow here. I see they're opposites in personality, even though they're of the same party and of the same ideology. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because Biden would have worked, as I said, and they're same party as Obama and Clinton.
And I think you can see all over Joe Biden's face at this point that that he knows, and I feel bad for Uncle Joe because the reason he didn't run was because he lost his son at about the time when it would have been right to declare, and he didn't feel like he was emotionally ready after the death of his son. And I feel really bad for Uncle Joe right now because he knows that his son probably would have preferred him, to have done that.
Yeah. So what's your take on that, Steve? I'm on to something with that.
No, it's definitely an opposites thing. It's a strategy that the other side uses. That's why they always try to cast. If in Obama's case, they try to cast the new person as being the shadow of the former president. It's always the shadow of the former president. They're just going to continue the legacy of the last president. They're not going to have their own unique presidency. It's going to be more of the same. So it's actually a tactic that they use to say, yeah, you do want the opposite thing, and it's not this person because they're just going to be the exact same thing again. So yeah, definitely that there's that kind of quality that, because there's always going to be things, no matter who the president is, on both sides, they're going to do things that you're not happy with or things you don't agree with. So you say, all right, I need something different. But you're only given two dichotomous options, and that kind of bipolar system makes you have to go toward the opposite direction rather than having, the options. You've either got one or the other. So if you're on one side, you have to go the opposite.
Yeah. All right. So since we identify all of these problems, where do we go from here? What do the Democrats do to fix this? What can they do to actually win? And I don't, and not just, well, let's wait out Trump. I mean, actually win. Do you think do you think that they'll learn from their mistakes here?
Well, no, I think there's two questions there. Like, what will they do and what should they do are two very different questions.
Okay. What do you think they will do?
What will they do is almost nothing. They'll probably continue exactly down the same path, in much the same way that the Republicans did their what they call it, their self-autopsy, and then took none of the results into account and continued the way they did before. The Democrats are probably going to do the exact same thing, right? What they do need to do is clean house, right? They need to get rid of a lot of the DNC, a lot of the incumbents, and need to focus back toward, like I was saying before, that what defines a traditional Democrat now is a Republican light. That's what a Democrat is, and they need to steer that back in the opposite direction. They need to go back towards a more progressive left agenda, and they need to put people in place at the DNC and across the party that represent that.
Fighters.
Yeah, people who give a real left option. I don't feel like Hillary Clinton was, and it's weird to say that because I know Republicans, I've criticized Republicans a lot over the last 8 years for having moved so far right that they've alienated the center, but there really doesn't seem to be like a counterweight to pull it back together. It seems like, we don't want to, as a left-leaning organization, we don't want to commit to being leftist because we've succeeded, or the Republican Party has succeeded over the last 30 years in making the word liberal into a dirty word. I strongly agree with Stephen that the DNC needs to clean house. Now, do I think that let me back up a little bit. One of the reasons that the Bernie voters are so upset is because they get this element of unfairness. Our guy wasn't treated fairly. He wasn't given a 50-50 shot to win. Well, that's not how real politics worked in the past. It's going to be how it works in the future, and bear with me for that. But that's not how politics has worked over the last 50 to 100 years. Look, Bernie voters have to understand that Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. He's never spent a day raising a dime for the Democratic Party. He's never campaigned one day for a down ballot candidate for the Democrats. No, not one. Never.
He's independent?
He's never been a Democrat. On the flip side of that, he was not a Democrat. He's an independent in the Senate. He returned to the Senate as an independent after he ran for president as a Democrat. He did not ever at any point join the Democratic Party. He's not a Democrat. On the flip side of that, Hillary Clinton has spent the last 40 years as a Democrat, campaigning for Democrats, raising money for Democrats, promoting the Democratic Party. Everybody in the Democratic Party structure owes something to Bill or Hillary Clinton. Why on earth would you think, looking at it that way, why would you think that Bernie Sanders could just walk in on the day of the Democratic primary and get the same kind of consideration from the Democratic Party that Hillary Clinton? Of course it was rigged for Hillary. She spent 40 years earning that. But that's not how politics is going to work going forward. That's not how this new generation works. And the Democrats are going to have to clean house, if for nothing else, than to get rid of that element and to create a Democratic Party that is actually a meritocracy, because that's what young people expect, whether it's actually fair or not. The truth is, I don't think Bernie was treated with disrespect or with unfairness by the Democratic Party at all. If he had spent 40 years building the Democratic Party, then he'd have a case. But he didn't spend 40 years building the Democratic Party of America the way that Hillary Clinton did, and therefore doesn't deserve their deference the way that she did. And that's not something that's going to be a valid viewpoint going forward, but I completely understand that viewpoint.
What's your take on that, Steve?
It's a really good point that I hadn't considered, which is that, and a lot of it comes down to the transparency of the new generation, right? Is that, primaries in and of themselves are a relatively new advent in our democracy. And so democracy is always evolving, generally to be more and more open, more and more transparent. And the whole primary system as a whole, as I said, since it's relatively new, is still evolving also. And so it makes sense that there's now this generational transition that needs to happen. And that's primarily the reason why I think a lot of the DNC needs to get out, because, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And so they can't walk into DNC and say, all right, we're not going to do things the way we've done for the last 40 years. We now really do need to do things based on pure merit like everybody wants. You got to put people in there from the beginning that see politics in that fashion. And that's not going to be anyone that's there now.
Yeah, I have a lot of ideas that when the Democrats need to do in order to win, like how winners should be winning. One thing that the Democrats did, well, I'll say Clinton, and then what they did was they try to play the same game Trump played with the media, where Trump was like, you know what, you said bad things about me, so I'm not going to show up on your stuff. And people like O'Reilly was like whining, like, no, he won't come to our show, And Trump was able to pull that off because I guess he gave folks some crazy ass ratings. Clinton couldn't do that, but she tried. So you take folks like the Young Turks on, largely on YouTube and stuff like that, who are really, they are probably among the best objective, media types, reporter types I see those so far. They're progressives, but you probably will be progressive if you're objective, because you want things to move forward. Anyway,
reality has a liberal lean, yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is though is that they'll actually ask the tough questions to all people who arrive on their show. So Clinton, she wanted flunkyisms, she wanted cronyisms in the media versus actually engaging in tough questions. Young Turks, it's kind of like the Daily Show. Young Turks is something that all these young, like the Bernie types and all these like the really young, energized activist type Democrat leaning or Democrat types are looking at and listening to. So you put yourself in front of Sync and all these other folks on the Young Turks, and make that happen. But she tried to cut these folks off, and it punished her severely because the only thing she had was the Clinton News Network, and no one. And people are beginning to see the bullshit with CNN as is, like that false neutrality. Yeah, people are not feeling that shit anymore. So she needed to more viewership. Number one, number two, and not try to punish actual progressives. Number two, listen to progressives and activists, people that are reaching out to you and saying like, hey, what can you provide for this problem set here? And she had no answers. Some of the emails that were released point out that she was a bit hostile towards Black Lives Matter activism, whatnot. That's problematic for you because, we want to vote somewhere. We as the Black community, we want to be involved. But if we don't have a candidate that can at least invest experience and resources into solving the problems with our communities and whatnot, you don't deserve our vote. And just because you look nice and smell nice doesn't mean that we'll vote for you. That's the way it should be. We should not vote for you based off of fear of the other guy. That's bullshit. Number three is the negative identity crisis thing. The Democrats need to actually engage in their activist identity, their identity back when, like, the civil rights era, the JFK, Robert F. Kennedy Democrat. That's what they need to be. That Robert F. Kennedy Democrat. That's what they need to be. Did he get assassinated? Yeah, he did. But hey, there's a lot of folks put their lives on the line in these oil wars. So if you want to run for government, you need to perhaps understand that your life is under the same freaking threat.
They don't shoot at you unless you're dangerous, man.
Yeah. If I can serve my time in the military, it will with perhaps the pain of death somewhere, then they can do that too. In any office in Washington D.C.
Yeah.
And take conservatives more serious. Don't just sit there and laugh at them. No, actually take them serious. They can be a threat.
Well, and I think their concerns are valid. What Donald Trump tapped into, if you'll bear me the space to say what I think about that, I think Donald Trump tapped into a very real fear that the way of life for a very large percentage of America is disappearing. He's right about that. The question is whether his answer is correct and whether his answers are good for that segment of America, whether they're good for America at large. I think, those coal towns and those steel towns and those manufacturing towns that that Donald Trump appealed to with the trade things and the big wall and this and that, man, those are real concerns, man. You can't just, and I feel like Hillary Clinton dismissed those concerns. She didn't go to West Virginia, and she didn't go to Western Pennsylvania, and she didn't go to Ohio and say to those people. She went to the people that were already listening and said, this is what we're going to do. But she didn't go to West Virginia and make a case to West Virginia to say, hey, look, the truth that Donald Trump says that, the Republican Party, this is my biggest criticism economically with the Republican Party, is that they live in this world still to this day where they believe that the right president and the right leadership is going to bring back the economy of 1955, that the right president and the right laws and the right rules are going to reopen the steel plants in Pittsburgh, and they're going to reopen Detroit, and they're going to remand. Those jobs are not coming back in the way that they were. They're never coming back. The world changes, the economy changes, they're not coming back. And a person like Hillary Clinton, and not necessarily Hillary Clinton because she's not really equipped to make this argument, but the next Democratic candidate who's going to succeed is going to have to go to West Virginia and go to Michigan and go to Ohio and go to those places where Democrats have strategically and repeatedly failed and say, you know what? I'm sorry your steel jobs are gone. I'm sorry that Carrier left Indiana. I'm sorry that Ford is building plants in Mexico instead of Detroit. But the times are changing, and this is what we're going to do for you. I might not be able to bring your car plant back, and I might not be able to fire up the steel mill, but I can get this done, and I can bring this to you, and I can bring that to you, and that's what we're going to do. It's not that we want to go back to what we had before, but we want to get you something new to create a new future.
I'll cut you off a bit. You're long-winded, and also the appeals that Donald Trump made. Technically he did the same thing. He talked to his own people, so to speak, when he visited out and about. I was there in Tucson when he visited Tucson, Arizona, in March, and
great article, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. Crazy experience. Walking to the belly of the beast. Anyway, the things he said had nothing to do with policy or anything like that. It was more like, oh yeah, Tucson. That's right. This right here is like a border city. Yeah, we got you. Oh, we got you. The Mexicans this, the Mexicans that, and these Mexicans this, these Mexicans that. That's what took place. The dumb blonde chick who pointed her finger in President Obama's face, she spoke there. Little ugly ass and shit. She used to be the governor of Arizona. She was there. Yeah. And she was like, Obama this, Obama that, Obama this, fucking Muslims and, like all this vitriol, like this false, nonsensical vitriol. That was what was spewed. I have a video of this one dude, I guess he's of Mexican descent. He had like the mariachi outfit on, and he just got out of the things. I got kicked out before he did, despite the fact that I was not protesting. I had a big camera. Photography is not a crime, folks. Photography is not a crime. Anyway,
I'm second in it.
Yeah, the dude was like, they're going to come out here where all protesters are and just going to attack folks, like, because he was there for the whole thing, and he felt like terror, like these folks in there are going to come through and see these protesters outside. They want to spit on them, kick them, beat them up, like all types of shit. Because you already saw Tony Petway attack a detained protester up in there. So I'll have to say, Trump's ground game was not about policy at all.
Oh no, but Clinton should have been.
Okay,
and that's the argument that I make. People heard what they wanted to hear out of Trump. because he didn't really say anything of substance. So they were allowed to substitute their own message because they liked him because of the ugly things he said. But
substance is maybe substance closer to arsenic, but
yeah, there's not much substance there, so people substitute their own reality where it's missing. I know you understand that phenomenon, but that's and not to get it, because I haven't, Stephen hasn't got to talk here, but I do want to say that it can't just be about strategy for Democrats. It has to be about the platform. It's time to take the platform apart and rebuild it for the 21st century. And because now we're 16 years late, and it's going to be 20 years late by the time we get a chance. It's time to take the platform apart, build a modern platform that doesn't just say, hey, we're against what the Republicans are. This is what we stand for, and we're going to stand for it like activists, not like politicians who are willing to trade it for what we want.
They don't even say that. They don't say that they're against what the Republicans are about. They say that I'm not those guys over there. I'm not
those guys over there.
Yeah, I'm not those guys over there. If they were against what the Republicans were doing, that'll be like infinitely far more.
Yeah, but what are you?
Exactly.
I'm tired of hearing what you're not. What are you?
Steve, what's your
do you
take?
stand for?
I think both sides of the voters and the politicians often forget that the concerns that each group of voters raises are legitimate. People don't just make up their own social struggles, their own economic struggles. They're real things, and indeed Hillary Clinton does ignore them. The Democratic Party ignores a lot of them. But you have to remember too that Donald Trump's base here was often uneducated voters. Was a lot of the. What do they mean by uneducated? Right? You want to equate that with stupid hillbillies, right? That didn't graduate high school, but that's not really what they mean by uneducated. The struggles these people have are real, but they don't have a lot of the background to understand the source and circumstances of those troubles, because they live a lot of time in these small bubbles, so they don't have that understanding of what's really causing this in the grand scale. And one of the things the Democratic Party ought to be doing is trying to reach out to them, to educate them, to say, no, your economic troubles are not because Mexicans are flooding the border. It's not because terrorism is a huge threat in the country. It's not, right? And trying to reach out to them and say, like, here's the actual reason as to why you're having these struggles, and we have the solution. The thing that the other people are saying, that's not the real reason, and here's why that's not the real reason. They don't do that. They tend to dismiss it out of hand as saying, well, they don't get it, right? And you need to engage with those people and find a way to educate them so they understand what those causes are.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that. I think the term uneducated gets taken by everybody out of context. It's just a way to describe people. Nobody's trying to say those people are dumb. They just, you're dividing, maybe blue collar is a better term. Mm-hmm. Because what you're really trying to describe is people who have, degree jobs versus people who work with their hands is what you're really trying to describe here. And their angst, their anxiousness and their problems and the issues of their life are different than the people who have the jobs in the office buildings and the computer rooms and the cubicle land. It is a little bit different. And I do think that Democrats have a tendency to dismiss those people as not getting it, rather than addressing their concerns in a respectful manner. And I think that's one reason they're angry with Democrats.
They already decide that, oh, well, these guys, they're defeated for the beginning. Like, okay, these people are already going to vote Republican because they've been voting Republican ever since the dawn of time, ever since they were sperm in their dad's nutsack. We might as well not even go there. We should actually fight in all corners of the United States.
Yeah, those people are working people, and Democrats are supposed to represent working people over, and then they have, while Democrats are saying, hey, we're trying to represent working people, the working people are calling Democrats elitist because we don't listen to them. And they're right. Yeah. I don't know about the elitist part, but they're right that we don't listen to them.
All right. So with that being said, what's some final thoughts on this whole thing here? What you got, Tim? Got to keep it short too, but yeah.
Yeah, man. I think you said it best when you said, man, we got to stop campaigning on fear of the other guy. That can't be what it's about. Stop telling me what the other person. The more you tell me about what the other person is, the more I know about them. That's that's not very effective.
Yeah,
I think it's time to rebuild a platform. That's something I hope to kind of be, as I'd like to continue. I'm going to continue writing, continue speaking. Maybe we can affect that platform a little bit. And I think it can't just be all about cynical political strategy, how to win this block of voters, how to win that block of voters. Man, if we're ever going to unite this nation and live out the true meaning of our creed, as the great as the great Dr. King said, if we're ever going to live up to our potential as a people, we have to do it together. We can't be to tip my hat to President Obama, we can't be a red state America and a blue state America. Somebody has to decide that this is going to be America for Americans, and then be the people who actually follow through with that, instead of just trying to fool 51% of the people on one day in November.
Okay. All right. Steve, what's your last word on this?
Yeah, it's similar idea. The progressive, a more or less progressive agenda needs to be set for the Democratic Party, and the people in the party need to support that from a moral standpoint, because that's what it is. Everybody talks about it being politics, but when you're talking about helping people raise up to improve their standard of living, to create diversity and acceptance in a country, those are moral issues in a lot of ways, and you need to get that type of agenda pushed through. That way you get that longevity. That way it's not about getting voter blocks from cycle to cycle, and you look at it more like what it is, a generational struggle to improve lives. And that message, because that's what the Democratic Party was about before, but it's not that anymore, right? It needs to be about improving lives for the future, and they need to go back to that message.
I'll have to agree. So, yeah, my word has been already spoken, so let y'all have that last word. So I'll say that it's about that time. Thanks for joining us. And before you leave, if you like what you heard, click like and subscribe to us on iTunes or SoundCloud or Stitcher, or wherever you go for your podcast. Do not let this be the last time we hear from you or you hear from us. Follow us on Facebook, AfroSapiophile. If you want to be heard, you can always leave a voice message at 202-854-1996. 202-854-1996. 3 minutes of fame will be aired on the next show. All right, with that being said, this is the Badass Bookworm, Steve James, Kentucky Tim D, and Soul Brother number one of a kind, signing out. Peace.